What I'll promise you is we will not waste the opportunity. I do not take for granted standing here. I'm here, and I will not waste it, and I have no doubt these guys will follow me and give you everything that we have to do our very best for you.
Tavares got his hand on it. Tavares with the steal. The other direction. He finishes it. The first lead for Southern Miss.
Strom deep center field. Torres chasing. It is gone, and the party is on in the Hub City.
Hey, Golden Eagle fans, I'm Southern Miss Stadium announcer Jackson Walker, and you're listening to Nasty Bunch and Beyond.
How's it going, y'all? Welcome in to another episode of Nasty Bunch and Beyond podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Trigg. Today, I'm joined by a special guest, Davis Wilson. He is a reporter for the Hattiesburg American. He has, been at fall camp, and we've seen some of the practices, and we've seen the first scrimmage, last weekend, and we've kind of had time to really look and let things marinate a little bit before we form any strong opinions on stuff. So first off, welcome. I'm glad you took the time to join us. And how are you doing, adjusting to Hattiesburg?
Dalton, thanks for having me on. I'm liking Hattiesburg a lot. It's a nice little town, and I'm happy to be here. People have been very kind, so I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, and we've talked about this before, but just for those listening, Davis and I, we've kind of knew each other from our Mavs interests, Dallas Mavericks interests. I see the Dirk jersey on the wall behind you there. Love it. So I'm very happy, that there's somebody that has that kind of outside connection too, because it's kind of lonely with Mavs stuff around here in Hattiesburg. But
yeah, Dalton, I was listening to Dalton for years. The Step Back pod that you did, I was listening to that. I'd read your stuff on SI and everything, and yeah, so it's cool to get to meet you here in Hattiesburg. And yeah, I got my Dirk favorite athlete of all time behind me.
It hasn't been. Look, I'm still, I still consider myself a big fan of the Dallas Mavericks, but it hasn't been the same since he left, and
no.
Especially since Luka got traded. So that was
we can do a whole separate podcast about
that's
that
right.
saga.
Well, I guess we'll get started. The first thing I wanted to talk about, and I'll give my take on it too, but where expectations were for Southern Miss football coming into fall camp versus now, where they're about to wrap up the third week, which will finish it up. Based on your expectations before it started, where are you at right now after everything you've seen? Would you say, your forecast for them improved, declined, or did it just kind of stay the same?
I think watching this team every day in practice and getting to know Coach Anderson a little bit and his coordinators, getting to know them a little bit, like the attitude and the mood around the team, at least in the facility, is feels very positive. They're excited. They think they have a really good group of guys. The one thing that they've all mentioned is that there's so many new guys that don't have experience at the FBS level. So they know they have talent, but fitting that talent in and finding out how they transition to this level has been the problem. And that's something still that even us who have watched these practices and games, we still don't know what that's going to look like entirely. So it's hard to know expectations wise. I think what I'll say is, like, the ceiling that I was picturing for this team before practice started, I would say the ceiling I have now is higher than that. I don't know how high of a ceiling it is, but I do think this team could be capable of, winning a game or two that maybe they aren't predicted to win. Like, I do think they have some really interesting pieces on offense. Defense, I think, has looked generally better than what I expected. So I think there are some positive things. It's going to be really hard to know, though, how all these guys mesh together and play at this level.
Yeah, you got to play against. I mean, scrimmage is one thing. Scrimmage is an upgrade from practice, so you get to know a little bit more. But you're still going up against your own guys. So I mean, you gotta start playing against other competition to really know that. But I would say, because we did our season predictions, or our preseason predictions, USM on SI before, well before fall camp, so about a month or so ago. And I would say my early prediction was probably more optimistic than most people's were. I think I predicted 6-6, becoming bowl eligible. And that was just based on, on paper, who they're bringing in, what they've done and everything. And I wouldn't say my expectations have been raised higher than that from, what we've seen so far. But I would say, in my own opinion, it's probably validated what I thought, they could do. So, that's the thing. I mean, you see what they are on paper, and then you get to watching them in practice. And like take the wide receiver room, for example. They're way more explosive than what I thought they were. Mm-hmm. I knew they had some playmakers, but, Jalen Himes and Elijah Singleton, the show they put on in that first scrimmage, their bursts, their cuts and everything. I'm just like, man, they could be a problem this year. So that's what I would say. I don't think I've, raised it any higher, but I think it has kind of validated how I felt beforehand. And like you said, the attitude is a lot of it too. I mean, you can have talent and you can have, depth and all that stuff, but if the team attitude isn't where it needs to be and the culture isn't set the way it needs to be, you're kind of fighting against yourself a little bit. But it seems like Blake Anderson has come in there, and it's a ripple effect across the rest of the coaching staff. They seem to have a good thing going. So we'll see how it goes. Big scrimmage this Saturday. It's Fan Fest, so open to the public. That starts at 11 a.m., so people can feel free to come out to that and, form your own opinions based on what you see. And then after that, the real thing will get ready to get started, because they'll be looking forward to Alcorn State for that season opener at the Rock, which I guess we can mention this now. We'll kind of work this in, but it was M.M. Roberts Stadium. It has been for a very long time, but you put out a piece maybe an hour or so ago about the Mississippi Board of Trustees. What's the situation with that? The stadium is being renamed, but what are the details on that?
Yeah, so there was a Mississippi Institutions of Higher Learning Board of Trustees meeting this morning. And from what I can tell, that's kind of a monthly meeting that takes place where they talk about schools and public schools in Mississippi. And today there was a couple things pertaining Southern Miss Athletics. The first one being that they approved a name change from M.M. Roberts Stadium to Renaissance Stadium, which basically there's a 10-year deal now that Southern Miss has with Renaissance Bank, which is a local Mississippi bank. And so Renaissance gets the naming rights. The name will change effective tomorrow, I think, and last until 2036, or that's where the current deal ends, is in 2036. So it will be a new name. I don't know about like the signage at the physical stadium, like when that'll all get sorted out, but it will. The name will be changed officially tomorrow to Renaissance Stadium.
And I mean, it's pretty significant, right? Because I think I read that this is the first instance of this happening, this kind of deal, doing this, if I'm not mistaken, a corporate deal or something like that.
That's right. Yeah, you're starting to see more and more as money gets more important, and you have to fund, certain things, recruiting, and your roster. Basically, you got to fund the roster. So teams are starting to do this more, where they have these corporate deals. And obviously, Southern Miss didn't have that before. It was named after M.M. Roberts, who was a former player and then later a member of the Board of Trustees. And it had been named M.M. Roberts, I think, since 1976. So it's been 50 years since they've renamed the stadium there. And yeah, I mean, it's a $13.7 million deal. So across the 10-year period, they'll be getting paid $13.7 million. So obviously financially there are benefits. but yeah, it's a pretty big deal and an interesting step for Southern Miss.
So just jumping back into the football stuff, we talked about fall camp. I talked about the receivers, and that's been one area that I've been really surprised with so far. Let's talk about the quarterback race a little bit. It's one of those things where, Blake Anderson and the rest of the coaching staff, they're not officially saying anything, but I mean, just from what we've seen, I have just presumed that Ethan Hampton is going to be the guy. He's been taking all the first team reps, and, aside from, he got off to a good start in the scrimmage last Saturday before he injured his hand. I think he hit his hand on a player's helmet, and, it kind of, all the x-rays were fine, everything's structurally sound. So he's, Anderson and them are expecting him or hoping he can be back by this weekend's scrimmage. But I feel like he's the guy, and they're just, not officially saying anything because they want to, get through fall camp and get closer to the first game without revealing their hand or anything. Am I jumping the gun there, or what do you think about the quarterback race so far?
I don't think you're jumping the gun. Obviously, it would be, if it was Hampton, without a doubt, I think they would have said it. But, it's hard to imagine it won't be Hampton because he's been, like you said, taking first-team reps in every quarterback drill in practice. He got the first drive in the scrimmage before banging up his hand a little bit. It would be surprising to me and a lot of people who've watched the team practice if it wasn't Hampton. And I think the fact that, his injury it doesn't seem like that is going to be a huge setback for him in terms of winning the job. And I think, an injury this late where, he hasn't thrown this week so far. He obviously left the Saturday scrimmage, did not throw Monday. He was throwing on the sideline with Davis Dalton, who's also banged up on Tuesday and yesterday. So he still is not playing. He's not throwing. He's not running the offense right now. He is out there. But to me, the fact that he hasn't kind of been eliminated from this competition with less than 2 weeks until the season starts because he's hurt this late, I think is an indication that he was in the lead, and they really like what they have with him. And to me, just what stands out is, one, he's looked the part in practice. He's thrown the ball pretty well. And two, he has experience starting and winning big games. Like we saw him beat Notre Dame with Northern Illinois a couple years ago on the road. That was one of the biggest upsets of the year. So he's capable and he's experienced. These other guys, Liddy and Hampton, both have looked good in practice. I thought they looked about the same in the scrimmage. Maybe one of those guys ends up with the job. It's certainly possible because Anderson is not, Blake's not tipping his hand at all. But I would say you're not incorrect in assuming that Hampton's probably in the lead.
Yeah, and just my personal observations of it, I feel like Liddy or White, I feel like either one of them could be the starting quarterback and do okay with it. From what I've seen, I feel like Hampton may be a little bit more consistent, as far as like overthrows and stuff like that. Now, it doesn't happen often with those other guys, but I just feel like, Hampton may be a little bit more consistent in that regard. And it's a shame we didn't get to see it for the full scrimmage this past Saturday because, that could have gone a long way in, validating those feelings. So we'll see how it goes this weekend. But, like I said, Anderson, he thinks that Hampton could be back, but like you said, he hadn't been throwing much. So
yeah,
something needs to happen here, tomorrow, Friday, or that's not going to happen. But yeah, so that's kind of where the quarterback situation is right now. Nothing official, but I feel like it's Hampton's job to lose at this point unless he re-injures himself. Okay, so we've talked about quarterback situation, the wide receivers. The receiver room is a lot deeper than I initially thought it was, and there's a lot more explosiveness there than I thought too. Aside from those positions, like, is there another position you look at on this team and you're like, they may have a little bit more talent there than I thought they did depth-wise.
Yeah, I think the one position that has improved, I was not here in the spring. I didn't get to watch spring ball, but some people, some other guys who cover the team, I've talked to them about it. And during spring ball, linebacker was a position that did not look great. I think Coach Anderson has said the linebacker position in the spring probably was the one they needed to improve the most. And they went out and they got a couple new guys after spring ball in between the spring and now. They went and got Tyler Lassiter, Wesley Edison, two guys they went and got. And to me, that unit now, you obviously have Haygood returning, Mathis Haygood, one of the only guys coming back on defense. He is taking a lot of the first team reps at linebacker. You have Wesley Edison, one of the new guys playing, I think looks good. Lassiter had a really massive scrimmage. Like he had an interception. He was flying around, tackles for losses. So to me, I was kind of warned, like, watch out for this linebacker room. It's maybe not great, but so far in fall camp, I think they've looked pretty good, or better, at least better than I was expecting. And I think a large part of that is because they went and addressed that room after spring ball and got a couple new guys in.
Yeah, and Lassiter specifically is a interesting story because defensive coordinator Joe Bolden, he stuck with him is the story. Lassiter, he had an injury. He was planning to go back to junior college because other teams recruiting him basically dropped him after he got injured. Coach Bolden did not. He stuck with him, and so it's my understanding, from how I translated or took in those quotes that they gave us at the press conference, it seemed as if when he got healthy and he got to Hattiesburg, teams were like, oh, okay, well, he's healthy now. We're going to come back and, try to pry him away. And he was just like, no, I'm going to stay where I'm going to stay with the guy who actually believed in me and didn't pull my offer. And it seems as of right now, it's worked out pretty well. So, we'll see how it goes. But like you said, he's shown some dynamic playmaking ability, and he's got real good instincts. He's his jump off the ball and his pursuit and all that looks great. Don't know who's going to be starting, and I mean they're going to be running a lot of different fronts, different looks. So there might be 2, there might be 3 linebackers out there at some in certain packages. So we'll just have to see. But I think he's going to factor in. He's going to be a big factor in how good this defense can be this season, in my opinion. So
yeah, for sure. And in the scrimmage, you're right. We did see them run. I mean, they're going to run mostly out of the base 4-2-5, which means they'll have 2 linebackers out there. But they did run some 3-man fronts, which meant they had 3 linebackers out there sometimes. So the depth there is going to be important. They're going to play a lot of guys at linebacker. They have, like I said, Haygood, Edison, Lassiter, Avery Sledge guy also coming back. They got a lot of guys there that they like. Caleb Triplett is a true freshman that's even getting a little bit of opportunities. That's a guy I know they like. So
highly touted recruit. That was a big get for them too.
Yeah. So I think, that's the depth of that position, I think has been a pretty good sign, I think, so far.
Sticking with the defense, one of my biggest takeaways, or I guess my least positive takeaway from that first scrimmage was I thought the tackling in the secondary was lacking. And now, given we don't know, is it more of the secondary issue? Is it more of Singleton and Himes? Are they just that good? Stuff like that. But I came away from that thinking that might end up being a weakness on the defense. And they made some plays, got some interceptions and stuff like that, some PBUs. But overall, I just thought the tackling just was kind of a concern. What are your thoughts on the secondary and, not just the depth, but is their ceiling maybe not as high as the other rooms, or is that just overreaction to one scrimmage?
Yeah, I think it's a interesting unit, like a lot of this team. We really don't know exactly what it's going to look like, just because these guys either transferred in from lower levels where they played a lot and were productive, or they transferred in from programs where they didn't play a ton. So it's hard to know. But what I'll say is, I think, obviously Blake Anderson mentioned that the tackling needed to improve. That was something they absolutely, I probably harped on, because that's what he told us post game. There are some guys there, though, that people are mentioning, like other players are mentioning as guys that have had good camps. Champ Lewis, a transfer from, I think, Tulsa. Yep. He is one of the guys that receivers have said is a difficult guy to go up against. Laquan Robinson. There's a couple guys that I think if they can mesh and if they can figure it out, I think they can be a pretty good unit. But right now, I do think there's still question marks there. And again, that could be, like you said, because this receiving core is good and it's tough to cover. Like that receiving core is not one I'd want to play defense against. There are a bunch of shifty, quick, most of them not that big, but just really fast and tough to cover, and hard to tackle. Like that's the other thing. So I would not want to play against them either. And I guess the hope is, if you're a Southern Miss fan, is that the fact that your defense is going up against this receiving core every day, maybe makes them ready to go against other opponents later in the season. But yeah, I think that's probably a position where I am the most I don't know. It's hard to know right now. They rotate guys there in and out a lot. I think they have a lot of guys who could play, but again, there's not really a set, 5 members of the secondary that are going to play a bulk of the game.
Yeah. Kobe Albert's a name that's been coming up too. I think they've, Bolden's mentioned he may not have the physical attributes that some of these other guys have, but every time somebody talks about him, they rave about him. So, he may end up being a guy getting a good bit of snaps this season too. Okay, so let's talk about the big men up front on both sides of the ball. So we'll start with the offensive line, because there's been a lot of movement there. I mean, you had an injury to Jameer Davis a few weeks ago. You had Brock Roman. He's medically retiring. You have this NCAA eligibility thing where, class of 2022 gets a 5th year of eligibility. So they're bringing back Maui and Greg Nunnery Jr. And on the defensive side, they're bringing back Jameer Lewis. So offensive line speaking, though, I mean, how do you feel about how things are playing out with that? Because not only are you having to – it's a situation where Blake Anderson has said, the big guys are the last ones to get in game shape throughout fall camp. And so you're having to deal with that, but then you're also dealing with all these guys going out and new guys coming in. They're not really new guys, but you know what I mean? They haven't been a part of it for a while. So, I mean, how do you feel about that? Has that kind of moved up the totem pole as far as being the most wild card situation the team has going into, leading up to the first week?
Yes. I think along with quarterback, this is the position that is the most wild card to me. And obviously quarterback, maybe you have an idea of, maybe Hampton will go, but Blake Anderson's told us a lot, the quarterback position and the offensive line, those two are ones that we don't know what's going to happen right now. We don't have a 5. They don't have a 5 set at offensive line. And really, it didn't sound like they are going to have one even, it could go into the season where they're rotating 5 guys, trying different combinations, because it's not just about the 5 most talented guys. It's about the 5 guys who play the best together. And so it is a good thing. I think getting, Maui back, Nunnery back, those 2 guys played together last year and started. So it is good to get those guys back. But like you said, they missed summer. They missed the spring. They are not in as good a football shape as some of the other guys that were brought in to play there. But, Coach Anderson has been I think he's been surprised by the fact that they are acclimating really well. Those 2, Jameer Lewis, those guys are playing. And so I think offensive line is the position group we know least about. Even being there every day, watching them play live, I don't know who's going to start. There's no telling. It could be a lot of different guys. So that's the one I think if you go to the scrimmage Saturday, that's the one I'd watch, because I think maybe Saturday is an indication of who they're going to run out there against Alcorn State. I don't know, but I think it will give you some sort of indication about who's playing well and who's ready to go. But I would say that's maybe the highest position room on the totem pole in terms of being a wild card right now.
And it's interesting too, because overall the offensive line room has a ton of depth. Like even with Roman leaving and Davis getting hurt, the two guys coming in, I mean, they've got a lot of depth, but the issue that might be causing some complications, I guess you'd call it, is it's a lot of guard depth. Like I feel like they're having trouble identifying like who's going to be our tackles.
Yes.
On the right and left side. So it'll be interesting to see, like, do you take some of those guys who are used to playing guard and, try them at tackle, or do you just keep a couple of those guys for depth in case one of your guards gets hurt? It's a tough situation to be in, but I don't think it's a bad situation either. Like you said, the depth is good. So, there's a lot to work with there, and we'll see what they do this Saturday. I thought overall, first and second unit, I thought the offensive line did fairly well in that first scrimmage. Now, they got tired toward the end of it. I thought they did a lot better in the first half than they did in the second half. They were kind of, hands on hips, huffing and puffing a little bit, which is understandable. But, overall, I thought they did well. The defensive front, you mentioned Jameer Lewis. I think he looks outstanding, from a physical standpoint. Like Blake Anderson, when they were coming in, he was kind of doubting, like, how good of shape they're going to be in. And then after a couple of days of seeing him, he was just like, okay, never mind.
Yeah.
Jameer Lewis is ready to go. And he showed it, I think, in that first scrimmage too. He's hyped up and looks like he stayed in really great shape. And he's going to add a injection into that defensive front this year on the edge. And, and then you have guys like Nassim Caro that, I put a piece out earlier today from that press conference he did earlier this week. He's kind of emerging as a leader, and he might be a little undersized for, like Joe Bolden said, as far as what you might want for the interior of your defensive line, but he's very explosive. He's violent at the point of attack. So those are two guys I'm looking at. Overall, what are you thinking about the defensive front and how they've developed from the start of fall camp until now?
I think that's a pretty exciting group to watch, especially now, like with Lewis back. Jameer Lewis, his first time in the game or scrimmage on Saturday, records a sack. Yesterday in practice kind of blew me away. Like, he's so fast off the line of scrimmage. He recorded a sack yesterday in one of the red zone drills. I think he's going to be their best pure pass rusher. Like, even after all this time off, he's fast, he's big, and he did get to the quarterback some last year. So, he can do it. Like you said, the defensive tackles, I think, have been overall pretty solid. Cairo, Gross, those two guys are. It seems to me like Darryl Gross and Nassim Cairo have kind of locked down the defensive tackles, at least the starters. They're going to play, like I said, they're going to play a lot of guys everywhere. On the other, the defensive ends, you got Cameron Cyprian, a guy who's, I think, looked pretty good. Zachariah Keith is a guy who's been unhealthy for seems like years, coming from West Virginia. And he put on a lot of muscle over, between spring and summer. And that's a guy I think is going to get a chance to play. So I think they have a lot of options there, and they have a lot of athletes there. And I think that's kind of an exciting thing when you're talking about defensive line.
Yeah, I've heard people talk about like this year's defense versus last year's defense. And obviously last year's team had a lot more built-in chemistry because a lot of them came over from Marshall and you had all that going. from a depth standpoint, I feel like the defense this year is probably a little bit better depth-wise. Now, I don't know if the ceiling could be as high as what a team that had that much longevity could be, but from a depth perspective, what we've seen so far, it's kind of the same thing with the receivers and the linebackers. I mean, it's just there's a lot of depth on this team, and we didn't even talk about running backs, but it's going to be the same thing there. Robert Briggs, I always thought he was going to be the starter, but he hasn't gotten much had much contact playing fall camp and didn't play in that first scrimmage, but I think he's coming back now, right? He's he should be ready to roll, and then you got Robinson and several other guys who can jump in there, and it's going to be a running back by committee thing. But Briggs should be coming back, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah. So I think I think it was Tuesday. I think that I first saw him out there in like full participation mode, like not
red jersey and
red jersey on. Right. He had his white jersey, and it is going to be running back by committee, but Blake Anderson is really pumped up about Briggs. Like, I think they're trying to make sure he's going to be healthy. They've been cautious with him. I think he could have been playing all fall camp, full contact if they had to. I think they're being really cautious because he does have histories with injuries, and that's kept him out for a long time. So I think they're really – but, man, Blake Anderson's pumped up about him. If he could stay healthy, I think he's going to have a good year. And then, like you said, Steven Robinson's kind of stepped into the RB1 role while Briggs is kind of working his way back. He's looked good. He looked good in the scrimmage. Jalen Foster, a guy's looked good. Jamaris Wilder is a guy I thought would look like – I thought he was going to have a good fall camp. I think he's been a little banged up as well. I think Coach mentioned a turf toe or something, so he didn't play in the scrimmage. But another talented running back. That's a deep room, like you said. Like, I think depth, and Coach Anderson said this, depth's their strength this year. They have a lot of guys they can run out there. They're not going to get tired. Like, they have so many guys that are going to be playing that no one player is going to get gassed. So I think they can use depth to their advantage. Obviously, it can also be a disadvantage when you don't have a guy. Like people say, if you have two quarterbacks, you have no quarterbacks. Or in this case, if you have three quarterbacks, you have no quarterbacks. But I don't think that's how Coach Anderson's looking at it. I think he's looking at it more like we have a ton of options all over this team, and that's going to allow us to kind of use depth as a strength of ours. So, and running back included, I think that room is going to have a lot of different players.
Yeah, you got different skill sets too. I think Briggs is more of like your perimeter guy, and then Robinson, and even like a guy like Robert Henderson.
Yeah,
he seems like he's very hard to tackle. There's several guys that are like that. So have a little bit of mix of speed and guys that'll ram it up the middle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they do.
Drag people for a few yards. So, all right. So we've pretty much covered everything football related. I want to end with this. We'll be real quick here, but we talked about the stadium name change earlier. A follow-up to that is a separate report, but Pete Taylor Park finally getting some upgrades. I don't know when those upgrades are happening, but they released renderings. What can you tell us about that based on that piece you wrote earlier? Because it seems like it's pretty exciting stuff.
Yeah, this is exciting. I'm brand new here. I'm brand new to Hattiesburg, brand new to Southern Miss. But as soon as I got here, all I've heard about, I got here right at the tail end of baseball, and all I heard about was people talking about, where are the renderings? We want to see what Pete Taylor Park's going to look like, because I guess it's been rumored that something's coming.
Well, I may have accidentally, and I probably owe Jeremy McClain an apology, because I had Southern Miss president Joe Paul on the pod before that regional started, and he mentioned during that episode that there were that they had a plan in place for renovations to the Pete. So when people heard that, that's when it's just I saw people in Jeremy's replies and, hey, when are you going to release the renderings? I was thinking, oh man, my bad, Jeremy.
Yeah, well, as soon as I got here, I guess it was right at that time, people were talking about the renderings. We want to see the renderings. And so today, in the same meeting that approved the name change, the Board of Trustees also approved the renderings of Pete Taylor Park's, Pete Taylor Park. And that doesn't necessarily mean they're approving the construction, doesn't mean the project is has a finished date or anything like that. Basically what it means is they've approved, it's allowing Southern Miss to use those renderings as they try to fundraise for this park. So it's going to be privately funded. So it'll be fundraising with donors and the general public as well. Southern Miss is now allowed to use these renderings to fundraise. So I think it's the first step in this in a Pete Taylor Park upgrade, which is exciting, obviously. And it looks like the renderings look pretty interesting. Looks like they're planning a new entrance. Yeah,
here's one. So that's
that new entrance. Yeah,
that'd be the new entrance there. That's pretty sweet. You got the little. I don't know if that's just going to be a garden or a fountain mix or whatever, but you got the eagle statue, and it's going to be great. And then this one, I think a lot of people will be excited about. It looks like there's some shade out there in that 16-ounce lounge.
Yeah, it does.
In the roost. Yeah. So
and they've got a kid's ballpark back there at center field. I don't know.
It looks like a little kids ballpark. And then I see that they're going to be moving because right now people who go into the roost, they drive in through that same gate where people come in to go to the lounge. Mm-hmm. And I think they've moved that entrance for the roost people down there to the far corner. So that'll be good because I've always thought that was a little bit of a liability, having people come with their trucks through the same gate. So that'll be good. It's exciting. Now I don't want people to get their hopes up and think this is going to happen next year or anything because we've been waiting on Reed Green Coliseum renovation since I think 2019. And they're just now getting started with all that. So, but very exciting stuff. And it's if you're a fan of Southern Miss athletics, it's a good time. I mean, they got a lot of stuff going for them. Baseball team reloaded, have one of the best freshman classes they've ever had coming in. They announced the other day that they're going to be playing a fall exhibition against Mississippi State on October 10th in Biloxi. So that'll be interesting to see. Get an early look at that team. Basketball reloaded in the transfer portal, and they've looked very good this summer too. I've got some more stuff coming out on them here in the next few weeks. And then, football. I think football is – I'm not going to make any solid predictions, but I think football might be a little bit better than what the Vegas odd makers are making it out to be. So, Davis, I appreciate you joining me. Tell the people where they can find all your stuff.
Yeah, they can find me on Twitter at I think it's Davis_Wilson41, which is an homage to our guy.
Yep.
Let's see. You can find me on Hattiesburg American. That's where all my pieces go. So those are the two places I am.
And you cover a lot more than just Southern Miss athletics too, correct? I mean, it's community stuff and
community stuff. I do news here. I do sports here. I'm the only one on site in Hattiesburg, so. I've got an office to myself downtown. I'm doing it all. At my I do news, I do sports, so you can find me there at the Hattiesburg American. There you go.
Well, you're doing a great job, and I appreciate you joining me today. We'll have to do it again sometime, man.
Anytime, man. I'd love to. I love joining. So thank you.
Yes, sir. I'll see you at the scrimmage Saturday.
All right, sounds good, Dalton. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Have a good one.
You too.
All right, y'all. That's going to do it for another episode of Nasty Bunch and Beyond. Appreciate all of y'all for coming in and listening. It'd been a while since we hopped on here, but I got to say, I may have underestimated how busy I was going to be once football preseason started with the site. But it's been great, man. It's growing by the day. A lot of good support from the fan base, and I appreciate all y'all's feedback and reading those stories and everything. And there's a lot more coming. So we have a great staff. It's not just me. It's my guy, Josh House, Charlie Lanehart, Andy Borelli. We're all doing stuff. So appreciate y'all joining and listening to the podcast, but I also appreciate all of y'all for, going and reading the articles and following along with us on social media. So I greatly appreciate it. Be sure to like, rate, and subscribe to Nasty Bunch and Beyond on all your favorite podcast platforms. And little plug here at the end, if you want some nice, high-quality Southern Miss merch at a discount, you can go to thetopmerch.myshopify.com and use our promo code NastyBunchPod to get 20% off your entire purchase. And if you want to go to shantymanfoods.com and get you some high-quality beef jerky, several different flavors you can choose from, use our promo code SMTTT and get 30% off there. So, guys, appreciate it. Y'all have a great rest of your day. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next time.